Now I'm going to show you how to make all of the different envelopes to match all of the different card sizes we've used doing the Top Score multi-board. Now this here is the enveloper. Now it's a fantastically simple little tool which we will find invaluable when you're making your cards, because every card needs an envelope, and quite often it's very difficult to get hold of envelopes in specific sizes or specific colours, or as you'll see we'll come on to in a minute, your 3D envelopes. Now this is the instruction booklet that comes in with it. It's a very simple booklet because it's a very simple technique. These are all the different size envelopes that you can do. And then if we have a look inside, you'll see if we start at the very beginning, for a very basic envelope, it's a 6-step procedure, and it's exactly the same procedure that you're going to follow through regardless of the envelope size that you want to make. What we're going to do all the time is refer to this grid at the bottom. Now with the grid, the first line tells you what size card you would have that you'd be making the envelope for. So for example here, we've got half of US letter paper. So if you've got one of the larger cards where you folded your US letter paper in half, this is how to make the correct size envelope for that size card. Moving along, if we've used a 1/4 size US letter paper, or a 1/3 size US letter paper, or we can do it for a half depth trifold, which is one of the trifold cards that we've then cut in half. If we're doing 6-inch square, 4-inch square, your slimline envelopes, your short slimline envelopes, and also your ATC envelopes. Now all of these match the different cards that you can make on the Top Score multi-board. Now like I said, it's a very simple procedure, and if we're going to start by making one of the very large envelopes, you'll see just how easy it is. So if we've got a card which is a half of US letter paper, it will tell you here we need to start with an 11¼ inch square blank, which means you're going to have a perfect square 11¼ inches measured on both sides. So if I bring in a piece of 12 by 12 paper and we get our paper trimmer out, I'm just going to measure on here 11¼ inches and trim off the excess that we don't require. And it's going to be exactly the same on both sides. We're always measuring to 11¼ . Now it's very important to remember, whatever shape of envelope you're making, you'll always start with a square of paper. So this is 11¼ inches square. Now if we refer back to the instruction booklet, you see it's saying here use lines F and G. Now these are the two lines that we're going to be working with. So if we bring the board back in, you start with the board facing straight on, and if you take your sheet of paper, now I always use paper for making flat envelopes, or the envelope boxes which we're going to come on to, I like to use card. And we position the paper right into the very corner as far as it will go. So I'll hold that up to show you, we're going right into the very corner there. Now the first line it said to score was line F. So you can read up the top, you see we've got A, B, C, D, E, F. And it's also the same, the lines are worked out at the bottom. So if we start with line F, when I'm working with paper, I like to use the rounded edge of my embossing tool. And we're just going to score up the line marked F. And we're going to turn the paper through 180 degrees, pop it back into the very corner and score F again, so that we've scored two opposite corners. Then on the remaining two corners, we're going to score the other line, which in this case was G. Now you'll see here that in the corner where we've scored line G, it's going to cross our original F line. And this is the principle behind how the envelope making works. As long as you have a square of paper and two lines that cross, you can actually experiment and make any size envelope that you like. I'll put the board to one side, turn our paper over, you can see there where we've got our score lines. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to fold in the two smaller sides, and then I'm going to fold up the base. Then if we bring in our double-sided tape and just position it right on the very edge, tuck this over and tuck that in. and then we can fold down the top. And there's our envelope. And it is that simple to make, and it is exactly the same regardless of the envelope size that you want to do. Now the next envelope I'm going to show you is for a trifold or a thin card, because you'll find when you do the very slimline envelopes, I'm going to show you an extra little tip. So if we bring in another sheet of paper, another sheet of scrapbook paper, and this time I'm going to read off for a trifold, which was a third of the US letter paper, we need to start with 10-inch square paper and work with lines D and G. So again, if I bring my paper trimmer back in, position this at 10 inches and trim off the excess that we don't require. Now it says to use lines D and G, so if we score D first, again we're right into the corner and we're scoring line D, which is the shorter edge. The lower letter is always the shorter edge. Then on the remaining two sides, again we're going to score G. Now as well as G, when I'm making a slimline envelope, I also like to score one of the lower lines. So for example, I would score line A or line B. So if I just run my tool up line B, you'll see in a second why we've done that. So it's just a little bit of an extra bonus, which you don't need to do, but I find gives a nice finish. So we're going to score B again. So again, turning this inside, folding the short edges first. Now what you'll find is if we just fold our normal line up, you see, the envelope doesn't quite look right. But because we scored the B line, if we fold in on B, when we stick that, it's just going to give a lovely, professional, perfect finish. So again, if we use the tape, first of all we can stick in our B, and then we can fold up the edges, and then it's up to you whether you want to cut off the excess at the top or whether you want to fold it in. I generally prefer to cut mine. And there's the great tip for your slimline envelopes. Now the next thing that we can do is actually to give a lovely finish to the envelope by lining it. So if I bring back in my large envelope, what you need to do is find a sheet of coordinating paper. Now I'm going to pick a very dark blue here just so that you can see the contrast. Now to line your envelope, what you need to do is make sure that the paper you've chosen is a little bit wider than the envelope at both sides, so you can see where we're working here. And then all you do is position the paper diagonally over the flap, leaving an equal amount, and then in the corners we just trim off any excess which isn't required. Then this is just going to tuck inside the envelope, and then we can lift up the lining, pop our double-sided tape in, and then again just crease over, which is going to give you that lining in your envelope, which just adds a very professional finishing touch. Now that is your basic envelope. Now I'm going to go on now to show you how to make a three-dimensional envelope. So if we put all this to one side, bring in our paper trimmer, and if we bring in a sheet of the nice pearlescent card. Now I'm going to make an envelope for the very small card, your one that's a quarter of US letter paper. Now again, we begin by referring to the grid, and because we're making an envelope for a quarter US letter paper, we're going to be working on this size here. So it says that we need to begin with 8 1/4 inch square paper, use lines D and F. So we open our paper trimmer out. I'm going to set my card to 8 1/4. Now I'm just using standard letter size card here, which you'll find is more than adequate in size. If we bring our enveloper back in, right into the corner, and the first line we were told to use was line D. So we're going to refer back to the board and score up line D. Now when we did the normal envelope, this is as far as we needed to go, but because we're going to do the 3D envelope, what you need to do now is you'll see where we butted right into the corner, but if I just move this out the way a bit, you'll see that there's actually a second step within the inside, and that is labelled here as envelope box. Now when you're using your envelope boxes, you're first of all going to score with your card butted right into the corner, and then you're going to score a second time with it butted into the envelope box lip. So now we're in that lip, into the lip we go, and we score line D again. So you'll see what we end up with is actually a double scored line here. We do the same on the opposite corner. We're going to score D into the lip and score D again. And then on the remaining two sides, we're going to score line F. So F and the envelope box for F, and the same here. Now the only difference we need to do now, because we're working with card, we need to cut away the excess in the corners that we no longer require. Just like this. Now I find when I'm working with the card, if you slightly moisten your fingers, you'll find that you can just rub the card between your fingers and it will find both lines for you. So we'll do the same here and on the fourth side. Now something we haven't yet looked at is these decorative shapes down the bottom of the board. Now these are for decorating the flaps of your envelopes. So if we work with this shape here, for example, all we need to do is take one of the larger flaps of your envelope. Again, if you struggle a little bit with the embossing, you can just pop a little bit of soap or wax on the corner. You position it, your card, right up against the two butting edges, and you just score around the decorative shape. Now the best thing is it doesn't matter at all if you go outside of the lines, because it is not going to show on the underneath of the card. And then all we're going to do is we're going to fold in the two side flaps. We're going to pop a bit of double-sided tape on the bottom, put the bottom flap up and the top flap down, and you'll see there how we get that lovely embellishment on the flap of the envelope, which just gives it that little bit extra. Now to stick this together, again you just put your double-sided tape around the very edges, and then I like to just hold it in place. And then if you want, you can tuck your flap underneath. And there's our envelope box, which is great if you've got cards with a little bit of depth on them, because you can see there that you've got the extra space inside the box if you've got an embellished card. Now it's exactly the same regardless of the envelope size that you make. You can easily get that 3D effect on the side just by scoring the line a second time into the envelope box.